Welcome to episode 54 of the Necronama.com. I am James Sabata, horror author, screenwriter, co-host of the podcast you're listening to right now, and sometimes I think my common sense was paralyzed.
And I'm Don Guillory, author, historian, educator, recognized lord in Scotland. And, you know, as a minister myself, as an ordained minister in one of the several online churches that are there, I often get asked about morality, which comes up in this film a lot, and I'm looking forward to discussing it.
So we don't have a guest today, so I guess I should answer why I picked this film, huh? So I'm going to go with, it's a total nostalgia thing for me. I think if it came out today, or, you know, like if I was this age when it came out, I don't know that I would have liked it as much. And I think that part of that has a lot to do with American Werewolf in London dropped before this. Or, you know, just there were so many other horror movies, and this never really finds its tone to me. And I think that if I had seen it as the person I am today, the first time I saw it, I don't know that I would have hated it, but I definitely wouldn't have the same attachment to it. One of my biggest complaints with it, as long as I'm bitching about it before I get a little more into why, is just Jane's narration. I don't understand why Jane's narration is even there at all. But I also feel like she lies to us all the time, and that makes me kind of hate her. Like, she's like, oh, it's a small town where everyone cares about each other. And then we spend the rest of the movie seeing everybody hates each other.
Right.
And at the very end, she directly says, I love you to Marty. And then the narration is something like, I was never able to say I love you to Marty. And I'm like, what the fuck? Like, you just did it, you know? And there's all these like little things that would just totally pull me out of it today. It's a very choppy movie. I don't feel like it's smooth, and I don't feel like I don't feel like the story always makes a ton of sense the way that they present it. And so I look at it as when I first saw it and I was an impressionable young lad. Holy shit, it was great. I didn't care that the werewolf was weird looking. I didn't care that, again, none of it makes sense in some parts, but it just totally got me. Like, I loved the concept of the werewolf. I loved Gary Busey's character, and I still do. Even then, I totally loved seeing a character with a disability as like the main character. I have issues with it now because there's a lot of stuff that I think Stephen King probably didn't understand about disabilities when he wrote it. But I love that they went there with it. So I feel like in many ways, this book, as well as this movie, influenced my writing. And so there's always that nostalgia door. But I'll be honest, man, like, I sat down for it and I was like, is there a lot of social commentary in this? Like, maybe I've made a mistake picking this. So my first question to you is, what did you think when I suggested it? And how do you feel about this movie?
Okay. My first thought was, after we were trying to decide between like 10 different movies, and you came back with this, and I was thinking like, oh shit, I thought we had already talked about Silver Bullet. But, you know, when you said, let's do Silver Bullet, my first thought was, or I might even put it in a text message, and it was like, fuck yeah, let's do that movie. I love that movie. And I did see a significant amount of commentary, social commentary, with respect to, you know, small towns, the law, mentality with people, loyalty, illusions themselves. I love this movie. And it's one of those things that it's one of those movies that where it has a good amount of pieces for me that make me go back to when I saw this back in the 80s the first time. And of course, when I saw it in the 90s, or when I recommended somebody like, oh yeah, if you want to see a cool 80s horror movie, it's real simple, real straightforward. You got to go see this movie. Like, and so my wife, she hadn't seen this movie. So we sat down and watched it. And I'm sitting there like not trying to lead her in anything. And I'm laughing at stuff that you shouldn't be laughing at in the movie. And for me, I'm laughing at those moments when I was watching it, because my cousins in Virginia during the summer, we would watch this movie probably about 2 or 3 times each summer. And my cousins, especially the dad, I can't remember which one, but the dad of Brady, when he finds out his son is dead, Like he just has this weird Herb Kincaid. He has this weird like cry when he finds out his son is dead. And my cousins and I, every time it got to that point, we would mimic his cry because it was so weird. And so I do that. My wife is like, "What's wrong with you? His son just died." And I'm sitting there like, you don't understand how many times I've seen this movie with relatives, and we sit there and we make fun of this scene because it's almost like he's laughing, crying, yelling, and like has irritable bowel syndrome all at the same time because of the way that he reacts to finding out his son is dead. You know, movies today, if you find it like somebody goes into complete, like later in the film where he's real quiet, real pensive in the bar, that makes more sense because it's kind of like, what the fuck happened? You know, I just buried my son. My son's been killed. Or even the sheriff, like he finds the bloody kite and he's sitting there praying in a catatonic state and walking and just thinking like, this is the most fucked up thing I've ever seen in my life. What could have done this? And then he kind of snaps out of it once the dad shows up. He's like, oh, fuck, I got to go back to being a sheriff. Like, I got to be strong for this guy. So I just found that reaction really, really out of place. But this movie for me, it's something I could watch and not get too tired of because there's not these weird and crazy twists that it's ruined for you. You know, if you're a very perceptive person, you figure it out like who the bad guy is or who the villain is within the first 10 to 15 minutes. So it's not something where you've invested an hour into the movie and there's a big twist. Because with this movie, it's more about Janie Janie, Marty, and Uncle Red as far as their relationship with each other.
Yeah.
And then about, this werewolf that's going around killing people because it's, everybody's dealing with it in their own way. But you see how this annoying ass little brother and his sister kind of deal with each other. And even early on, you see how she hates the fact that he's crippled to use the nomenclature at that time, because it means that she has to help him. There's less freedom that she's going to have. But then you also see these cute moments where, Marty fucks up, plays a prank on his sister. She tears her stockings and he shows up and gives her the money and apologizes. He's like, I don't know how much it costs, but here's the money. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to happen this way. So you get to see like how they work together, how a brother and sister would get along and how they wouldn't get along, as opposed to which, is the scary movies I wouldn't say I've grown accustomed to, but I think would make for a less believable scary movie is when, the brother and sister, they love each other and they're always getting along and, they have to have their love fully tested because this monster's in town or this murder or whatever, as opposed to I fucking hate your guts. And then 5 minutes later, I love you. I fucking hate your guts.
That's so much more realistic too. Like you don't get like if Marty didn't give her the money, then he's just kind of a brat and you don't care about him. It's a really delicate balance. And that's one of those things that King does really fucking well. And, King wrote the book and he wrote the screenplay for this. So I'm giving 100% credit to him on this. But that's one thing that he always does well. He knows how to walk that line of not being annoying, but still having your moments.
Right. And he does it very well. Really does fast. It so well. I don't give a shit about the parents. That's how well he does it. And I'm not saying that in a mean way. It's kind of like he does such a good job of talking about the relationship or explaining the relationship between the brother and sister and the relationship that they have with their uncle, that you don't give two shits about their parents. You're not sitting there thinking like, oh man, their parents need to step in and do this. I forget that they have parents about halfway through the movie.
Well, in fairness, their parents are so shitty that when somebody's killing people, including the best friend of their son, they're just like, well, we're going out of town for the weekend. So we probably wouldn't have liked them very much anyway.
Well, if somebody was running around killing people, wouldn't you get the fuck out of town too?
The uncle just, your kids.
Well, I mean, he didn't have tickets for all of them. I mean, that's why he was, that's why he was there. He's like, hey, I want to
really tight. We got to go.
I'm surprised
So
they didn't say some stupid shit like what would have been said today. Like, well, oh God, I forgot the comedian who made some really poor joke about ADA. And I'm surprised they didn't make some weird, crass 1970s, 1980s joke about the fact they couldn't take Marty because there weren't any ramps or something. Like, that's kind of what I expected. And I'm glad they didn't throw that in, because I've seen other movies where it's kind of like, well, we'd love to take you, but hey, you're in that chair.
Yeah. Yeah. They definitely do a good job of avoiding stuff like that, which was not normal at the time. So that is kind of impressive. I've never thought about it.
Well, no, and not just there. Like, I don't see any discussion of Marty being in the chair until, I mean, as far as detrimental to him, until it's his Uncle Red defending him, and when it's his girlfriend's dad, like, talking about, oh, fucking cripples, oh, they're just gonna go nowhere and then be on disability, and I'm gonna be paying their disability and my taxes. Like, that's the only interaction that comes up where someone is vocally talking about him having a disability or him being in the wheelchair. Because the rest of the time, the wheelchair is present, but it's not a character. Yeah. Like you see in some films where it's like, oh shit, I'm going, down a slight incline, and my wheels won't stop, and this leads to me getting, trapped underneath the porch or something, to where, it almost seems like you're ridiculing the person's disability. Because even when he does get stuck that one time, where it's you're not scared because the wheelchair is stuck. You're scared because, well, Marty's out of gas, right? He's kind of stuck on this piece of wood in this old bridge, but that's not even your concern. It's kind of like, oh God, the guy who's the werewolf is going to get him. Oh shit, But it's that same concern you would have had if he were a kid who was quote unquote able-bodied. He's stuck in that bridge with this guy. Or this covered bridge with this guy. So it's not even an issue of, it's because of his wheelchair. It's an issue of, well, it's because he's alone.
Yep. No, I mean, you could have easily done what they do in thousands of movies, and like your foot goes through the board and gets stuck, Yeah, no, that's a great point that I hadn't even considered, that it's really not about the wheelchair. But I mean, as I'm thinking about it, as you're saying it, I've never once thought, oh shit, the wheelchair got stuck. It's 100% fuck, what's Marty going to do?
Right.
That's great. I just want to say really fast, you had mentioned that they don't really hide who the bad guy is. And I think that they could have done a lot better, because I feel like they just make him evil the whole fucking time. Like, as soon as you see him at the beginning, you're like, that guy's an asshole.
Right.
Like, it's so crazy. And I don't think that's just my biases to his job. I think that he just looks evil all the time. Like, I don't know. They're not very good at red herrings in this.
No, and the thing is, I think that it was a good tactic to not do that. I mean, as far as like not lead you in one direction, and because as the viewer, you're sitting there the whole time. That's fucking him. That's fucking him. I'm waiting for somebody else to realize he's the bad guy. And it really doesn't take place until, Janie goes on her, canned aluminum and glass recycling drive or whatever, because it's a good way to see people and determine, who's missing an eye, because Marty has been able to shoot the eye out of the werewolf. But to find out who it is, and as soon as she does, she's like, oh shit, the minister's missing a fucking eye. And you think a lot of people have been talking about that, where, the minister would come in and say, oh yeah, I don't know, I was gardening, or some crazy shit. And
the trowel got out of control.
Yeah. He could have come up with anything like, oh, I was praying the other day, and I hadn't been eating. My blood sugar got low, and I fell and hit my eye on the end of a pew. There's so many ways he could have said it, because, a lot of these smaller communities, one of the people who's a symbol of authority is the church. Mm-hmm. And not to get too deep into civics course, but the two people that you see that are the symbols of authority, are the church and the state. So you've got the church side, and you have, as far as with Reverend Lowe, but then you have the state side with Sheriff Holler, and you get the mayor, but the mayor is just kind of like an afterthought. You understand that the sheriff is supposed to be a law and order. He's supposed to make sure that everything is the way it's supposed to be. People are calm, people are safe, and what you start to realize is neither one of those things is protecting people. So the sheriff can't protect anybody because, one, he doesn't know what's taking place, right? And then when people become infuriated, they want to take justice into their own hands. But when it comes to the priest, he's the fucking cause of all this shit.
You know, in the book, it's interesting because he's the Baptist minister and Marty is Catholic. Okay. So like 4 months, I think, go by before he finds out who it was, because he doesn't find out until, I want to say, Halloween. I haven't read it in a while, but yeah. So 4 months go by because he doesn't notice, because he doesn't go to that church. Right. So he doesn't interact with him. And I think that that's such a great way to just like put off the reveal in the book. And sorry for anyone who hasn't read it. No, just kidding. But I don't know. That's actually another problem I have with this film, is that it covers several months, but they're really bad at showing time moving.
Yeah, it seems like it's a week.
Yeah. Yeah, like how many full moons did we have this week? But yeah, it's a very strange thing. I don't know. But going back to him being revealed, I think it's one of the most powerful scenes in the film. Like, you get that shot where Janie's behind him from our perspective, right, and he's up close and we can see his eye. So we see it before she does. Right. And we immediately get that tension build and all of that. And I love this point in the movie. It's such a great scene.
Now, before of course, we're jumping around, and we're going to come back to the, other things.
We're being very choppy, just like the film.
Hey, we're staying on brand. With the minister itself, and you can tell me if this was the way it was in the book.
Try.
But did he have that I guess is the dream included in the book where, he dreams that all the parishioners are going to tear him apart by turning into werewolves, or was that created for the film?
I am 99% sure that was just the film.
Okay.
I don't remember that in the book, but I'm not positive.
Because it struck me as a film thing. It doesn't strike me as because it was almost as if with the film version they were going out of their way to tell you who it was. Yeah. So there wasn't too much energy spent on the audience of, hey, I need to figure out who it is. But the dream sequence, and those of you who've seen it, those of you who haven't, I guess 20 minutes in, we apologize for all the spoilers that are going on. But the idea that you have this minister performing the funeral for several members of his parish or several members of his church, and it devolves into this seething anger and hatred, and everyone turns into a werewolf and then jumps him and tears him apart, right? What I like about the addition of that into this film, and there are a few other films where they've kind of done something similar where, the monster or the creature or whatever sees themselves as a potential target. But I like the idea that this guy early on, and leads to some inconsistency later, but this guy knows it's a problem, feels some remorse over the fact that he can't control what he does. Mm-hmm. But he has to come up with some rationale as to why it's okay for what he's doing. And there's this an early indication of what's taking place. And we talked about this whole idea of, Jason Voorhees being the angel of death, or you've talked about it at length before.
Yeah.
And that's what we have in this minister of, he's in this small town. He's only, I guess, exorcising his demons by, sacrificing those who were going to do something that in the eyes of the church or in the eyes of faith were evil and we're going to lead them on a one-way trip to hell. So the first person that you see killed that is linked to some murder, because the first death is seen as an accident, or at least the townspeople view as an accident. And we'll come back to that.
I want to talk about that. Yeah,
Oh,
we'll come back to that.
Yeah, because the first one, as an audience member, you know what took place. Like, some monster got this guy, but the entire town thinks, oh, this guy was drunk and fell on the tracks. But the first death that that puts the town in fear takes place with a woman who at the county fair or picnic, you overhear her admitting that she's pregnant by another guy, pregnant by a married guy, and he basically says, fuck you, I'm not, it's your problem now. It's not my kid. Go to hell. Basically, being a shitty human being. And she has the idea, well, fuck it. I'm gonna kill myself. I can't get an abortion, or I can't afford one. I'm so depressed with this situation, so disheartened. I'm gonna kill myself. And before she has a chance to, the monster shows up and kills her. Reverend Lowe, later in the film, when he has Marty pinned in that covered bridge, tells him, like, hey, I killed this person because suicide will send you to hell. I'm saving her soul by murdering her. I'm saving her soul by killing her because I'm preventing her from committing suicide. Now, this is like one of the great weird monologues a villain can give, because the whole time I'm thinking, like, okay, he's fucking talking and all it's doing is preventing him from killing Marty, like he's talking like he's going to do. But, he goes so far as to say, I don't kill the innocents. I don't kill children if I don't have to. But we all know that he's fucking killed Brady. And my question is, what the fuck was Brady's crime?
Right?
It's the kid flying a kite.
Clearly the kite was the problem. But to go back to that first murder really fast, where he supposedly fell on the tracks, how shitty is your police department? Like, you can see the machine that's sitting on the tracks.
Right.
Which means that a train couldn't have fucking come through there. There's nowhere for the train to go. And it's like 10 feet from him. So how did all these people come out there and go, he must have got hit by a train? Never mind that a train hasn't come through here. Never mind that this piece of machinery is sitting on the tracks and a train can't go through it. I don't understand this death at all. I don't know if this is just a fucking mistake on the part of the people that were filming it, but this death makes me nuts whenever I watch this film.
You know what? I don't have that same problem, because I could see this as a way that people, I guess, devalue the guy's life, because they're very flippant and say, man, everybody knows he was a drunk. He got drunk and fell on tracks and train went over his head. It's not one of those things that you're really going to go research it because you're not suspecting foul play. And you just figure, well, that's probably what happened. And not go any further from that, because what's the point of that? It's we got a dead body here. His head's cut off. He got decapitated by a train. He's working on the trains. He's always drinking. And, as opposed to investigating. And I've been in places where those same things have happened, where it's very, strange circumstances, or at least foul play might have been suspected, but at least the person whose body was found, it was quickly explained away as, oh yeah, he was probably drinking and X, Y, and Z happened. There was this one guy when I was in college, they found his body in the lake in this area, and they just realized, like, oh, he probably just fell in the water and drowned over the weekend. And so a lot of people were asking questions, and then it turned into, he dealt a little weed and he did this. He was probably high and fell in there and drowned. Which is, it's a good way to wrap things up with a bow, so you don't have to look for an answer.
It's crazy. Crazy, I tell you. They're just ignoring the obvious.
Yeah. But you know what? Maybe that speaks to a larger issue that in these smaller communities, you don't want to upset the peace of those areas by looking for things.
Mm-hmm.
You know, uh, my wife and I, we watch a lot of, these goofy trash TV things every now and then, like 90 Day Fiance, or, she might watch something on ID channel or, whatever. But there are always these moments where somebody's like, oh, well, there was this, he got a text message or she got a text message, or, oh, I saw a picture of him or her with somebody else in their phone. And my wife always jokes and says, if you go looking for something, you're going to find it.
Mm-hmm.
Not excusing the person for it, but saying, and the same thing applies here, where in a lot of these small towns, if something takes place, there are a lot of people that don't want to go looking for the answer because it makes them break from whatever the fantasy is that they had about, their small town where nobody locks their doors, or their safe little town that everybody waves and says hello. There couldn't possibly be a serial killer here. This isn't that kind of town. All these people just happen to die, with I don't know, with these same cause of death and the same method. I think it's that idea of people want that comfort. Whether it's the suburbs or whether it's the rural area, people want that comfort that comes with it, so they can kind of point their finger and say that type of stuff doesn't happen here. That happens in the big city.
Yep.
So when you have these murders that start taking place, they immediately shut people down. Like there's that curfew that's instituted. There are all these measures that are being taken to make sure that people are going to be safe. And of course, what do people in this town start fucking doing? We're going to go hunt the monster. Like, okay.
I love the private justice
I think it comes
scene.
down to comfort. Yes.
The private justice scene is some of the best acting in the film. The speech that the sheriff gives.
Yeah.
And then of course, the follow-up from Brady's dad, like you mentioned earlier. I like this scene because I feel like you could pull it out and put it in a lot of other movies, and it would totally work. I think you understand everyone's motivation in this scene, no matter what side of what they're on, and it all works really well together. And it's a super powerful scene to me. From the guy who's like, don't fucking listen to the sheriff. He doesn't know what he's doing. Like, you don't tell me to shut up.
Andy,
thank you. And then you have the sheriff who's trying to plead with them that that's not the right way to do things. And you can totally get both sides. Like they make perfect fucking sense,
Right.
And then you have Brady's dad who just hits that fucking cold ass, I'm going to go get some private justice speech. And I mean, wow, this scene is one of the scenes I really look forward to every time I watch this. So my question to you is, do you feel that this scene has any relevance right now in America?
Well, before I incriminate myself, or I guess future incriminate if this is Minority Report rules, I understand Brady's dad, but I also understand Sheriff Holler.
Yep.
And like you said, that's the great part of this scene is they both make compelling arguments, and not just Herb, Brady's dad, but Andy, the guy with the mutton chops, who's kind of assembling this lynch mob. Which the sheriff even goes so far as to say, "Hey, you're at this step. The next step is lynch mobs and ropes." And at that moment, it's like you could hear a pin drop because the sheriff basically says, like, I mean, he starts off saying, "I didn't deputize any of you, so whatever the fuck you're doing is going to be illegal."
Yep.
And almost giving them an in, like, if I do deputize you, then you'll be able to go do this shit. But the two arguments that are given are great because you can see how both are correct and both are wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Herb, Andy's dad, Brady's dad, I'm sorry, doesn't necessarily have. He's not necessarily arguing from emotion's sake, but he's giving an emotional argument, a passionate argument, by stating that he should be within his rights to go seek that private justice because he's not going to be able to get it through the traditional means. And historically, stuff like that has taken place, and it's been in that gray area of the law. Of the law in social norms. But the sheriff also says, like, hey, we got to do this the right way. We're a city of laws or a town of laws. Like, I'm the law and order here. I'm supposed to make sure that this stuff is done a certain way. You can't just fucking go out there and start doing whatever you want, because let's be honest, how this shit would actually turn out. Anybody who was different, anybody who was new to the community, anybody who they felt like might be responsible for it, like, somebody in the town who just happens to be a little reclusive, that person's going to be a fucking target. And there's nothing that you're going to be able to do to stop these people from engaging in this. And you've seen numerous examples of. I mean, this past week there's been that discussion about Tulsa, the Black Wall Street massacre. You also have Chicago in 1919. Any year you can point to a racial uprising, urban rebellion, urban uprising that's taken place. But in a lot of those situations, if it's, let's just say Hurricane Katrina, you had a lot of vigilantism in some of these neighborhoods. And what people were stating was, well, if you come into this neighborhood and we don't know you, we're going to shoot first. Now, imagine if you were in the middle of a crisis and you need some help. Let's say like, even with this town, somebody had a fucking blowout on the side of the road and is now walking, trying to look for some help, and a bunch of fucking derelicts jump out with shotguns and rifles and shit and shoot this person, and then bring them in like, hey, we caught him, sheriff. Like, that's what happens when this mob mentality takes over. There is no rational thought. There is no rational action. It's simply what is going to be the most popular thing to satisfy our bloodlust at that point. Mm-hmm. But with these characters themselves, whether it's the sheriff's side or whether it's Andy and Herb's side, there's that idea that there has to be some way to approach this. Because the least safe place for any of you to be is out in the middle of the fucking woods. And anybody who's a horror fan, as soon as you see these guys going out into the woods, you're thinking like, they're all going to fucking die. This is great. So it looks like private justice doesn't work, fellas.
It's interesting to me how much this movie takes from slashers. Mm-hmm. Like, you get the point of view shots from the werewolf, things like that. And this scene you're talking about, going out into the woods, that's a definite slasher vibe, And I mean, slashers were all the rage at the time, so it makes sense. I just noticed this, to be honest with you. And I'd never considered that you could write a slasher werewolf story. And now I think that's great. And I'm sure it's been done repeatedly, but I'm going to pay more attention to it. But yeah, I just had to mention that while you were talking about this scene.
Well, no, when you're talking about perspective, you also have to consider that the Reverend shows up at that bar. And when they all start leaving, he's like, no, this is not the way to do it. Please stop. And I'm paraphrasing. He's like, he's basically pleading with him, like, don't do this. And I think for him, it was simply, well, if you guys go out and do this, I can't fucking control this bloodlust. So if you go out there seeking revenge, I have to go out and then save you guys from the sin that you're about to commit by just having this bloodlust. So, I could also see that as, maybe the sheriff, maybe the reverend, the minister is sitting there thinking, if I stop you guys from doing this, I don't have to go out and kill any more of you.
Well, and in the book during this part, what he does is he gets in his car and he drives out of the state. It's a very, very different feel. It's, oh shit, they're hunting for me. I better go.
Right. And at least in the fair mindedness or the even keeled mentality that he would have as a human being, the way he can rationalize all this, yeah, he probably would say, you know what, I'm going to get in the fucking car before it's too late and get out of here. Because maybe that's the cool thing about this type of werewolf. He knows the community. He knows what people are doing. Knows what people are planning. Knows what sins people are committing. He can stop it by going somewhere else because he wouldn't have to come into contact with somebody else's sins. And think about the relationship a minister has with a town, especially a small town like this.
Oh yeah. Shit, in a small town, everybody already knows your sins.
Yeah. Everybody knows everybody. Everybody knows the rumors. They know the at least what is to be believed about you.
Yep. Everybody definitely believes that they know who you are.
You just hit on something. And maybe that's another thing that you can attribute to this film as well, is it gets into that idea of people think they know who you are.
Yeah.
And the level of trust that there is in the idea of a uniform, whether that happens to be law enforcement, military, religious cloth, there's this idea of there is an identity that comes along with that and an understanding of who those people are. So, even given the current climate, you can have discussions with people about what it means to be in uniform, as far as to see a uniform and what comes along with it. Whereas, I would see, a uniform itself, like firefighter. Like, I know what your fucking job is. I know what you should be doing. And I know there are no songs that are talking shit about you, just because of, the role and responsibility that you have in society. And the same thing with, law enforcement. There are certain ideas, certain perspectives that we have as far as just looking at the uniform, not talking about, police itself, but understanding like what the uniform means or is supposed to mean. And especially in a small town where your sheriff, your police chief, anything like that, that person then has a little bit of an elevated status because you're trusting them to do all the right thing. I mean, this town is so small that when people start arguing that first part of the bar, at least when some stuff does happen, the deputy basically says like, they're having this grand discussion about everybody knowing so much about each other to the point where this Andy or something says something about, hey, I pay my taxes, goddammit, and the police should be doing this. And the guy right next to him is like, yeah, you didn't pay your taxes last year. So, just kind of like, I just finished taking my sip and I'm like, well, I'm an accountant in this town. You didn't come to me to do your tax return. And this is for anybody who's old enough to remember that you would have to go to an accountant or, to really do your right. Tax returns, as opposed to I can just go on TurboTax and do it in like 20 minutes. But yeah, there's that part. And it's this, even outing things like, yeah, you still owe $300 in parking tickets, buddy. Just that the way that everyone is understands their role in this microcosm and how they kind of play off of each other. There's so many political discussions that can be taken from that first interaction at the bar and even the second interaction to the point where even the bartender himself, the owner of the bar, pulls out a fucking baseball bat that says Peacemaker on it.
Yep.
Just to remind people, this is my fucking bar. You started any shit, I'm going to start beating your asses with this bat. It's just brilliant how all this stuff is working to where people all know their different roles and then know how their interactions are going to take place with each other. To the point where, the minister has a significant amount of control early in the film, but at a certain point, he can't control his congregation anymore. Well, so I guess,
yeah.
I guess the Jesus comparison, he's lost his sheep.
Sad day.
You're not even going to jump on the sheep and wolf remark there?
Yeah, I could, but I mean, it's so obvious. No, I'm thinking about the fact that You brought up state and religion.
Right.
And it is such a constant thing in this film. It's always there. Religion's ground in from the very beginning, whether it's the priest giving the little speech, or minister, whatever he is, giving the little speech at the beginning. Even like, I don't remember what it is, but Janie makes some comment that's about religion when she's facing the snake. Also, a female facing a snake. Hello.
Right.
There's so much constant reference to religion. And when I was watching it, part of me was like, that's kind of giving away where this is going. You know, you're setting up this minister as the bad guy through this. But it's also so ingrained in small towns. I tried explaining it one time when I was dating Linda, my wife. I was like, you don't understand small towns. It's not, do you go to church? It's, which church do you go to?
Right.
And she literally, she literally couldn't grasp that because, she grew up in San Francisco. It's a very different place. And I think it really shines through in this film, especially for the time as well. Just religion is a part of your every moment, every day, And I love that they use the minister as the werewolf because it's such that juxtaposition. And it's the one guy no one in this town would suspect.
Right.
And then to the point, I think that they could have really dove into Marty. Like when Marty and Jane know the truth, I think that they could have dove in even harder on people refusing to believe them, because that's just how small towns work in my experience. It's, you kids don't know anything. He's great. He's done this for the community. He's done this. You need to be quiet and not say these things. And nobody cares what the truth is. They care about that image, right? And I think if King dropped this today, we would explore the shit out of those themes. And I just kind of wish that if it ever gets remade, which I would prefer it does not, but if it ever does, I hope that they explore that.
Well, I mean, it would be a great discussion of the way that we treat things now, especially with the Me Too movement. The idea that all these men and some women that were sexually abusing minors, excuse me, that were sexually abusing and assaulting children, and women and men, that people were starting to question the victims, and then saying things like, I don't know, maybe when someone was up for a Supreme Court seat, saying things like, well, you don't want to ruin this man's career. And my question is, one, why would you be concerned with this man's career when someone is coming to you and saying, I was sexually violated and attacked by this person? And then two, how many times can I say, go fuck yourself till will you get the point of not re-victimizing victims? And that's kind of where we are now with that. It's this idea of you can ruin this person's career because of this accusation, or that it couldn't possibly be X because they've donated so many millions of dollars to good charities, or it couldn't have been this person because they're a pillar of this community. And I hate to break it to you, but there are a lot of good people who do some horrible shit. Or at least people present themselves as good, doing a lot of horrible shit, which is great, and I made that joke about the wolf and the sheep analogy. But think about that idea of a wolf in sheep's clothing. I mean, if somebody is presenting themselves and they are victimizing people, they're preying on people, that's exactly what they're hoping you're going to see. You're not going to see the fangs. You're going to see the wool. You're going to be like, no, that's one of us. Like, why would you say anything about the minister? Because when Uncle Red is approached by Marty and Janie, it's the minister? No, it can't be. How do you know? Well, he's missing an eye. Oh, come on. It seems weird that he doesn't understand, or at least think it's real until he sees the paint. And that's the part that always gets me. Like, those kids don't lie to you. Like you're the cool uncle, the one they confide in, the one they go to when they can't talk to their parents, and they're gonna lie to you about seeing some dude, some guy almost attacking Marty in the middle of the night, or it was a monster attacking him. But then when Jane goes looking for somebody, it's the same, the same injury, the same exact injury to this other person. And she finds a bloody bat in the garage that used to belong to the bar owner. But for me, it was kind of like, oh shit, what color paint was the Reverend's car again? Blue. Oh, he sees the blue streak marks on the side of the silver bullet, and even as I watched as an adult, I'm like, that maybe that's what it takes. It's not the big things where you're kind of like, hey, I saw a dead hooker in the back of his car. Really? I don't think that's what happened. Are you sure that you saw a dead hooker? Yeah, her ID fell out and this and this and this and this and this.
Her hooker ID?
Yeah. I am hooker. But you find all this stuff and then it turns into, what's that guy's favorite snacks? Oh, it's those Cheez-Its. Oh, I just found some Cheez-Its right here. That's got to be him. Marty could have run to a fucking pole that was blue. It's just one of those things where that wasn't what you needed. But it's great that at least that one adult comes forward. It almost seems like he's all in at that point. Like, all right, if he is a werewolf, how do we get rid of him? Not, you guys are full of shit. This is weird. This doesn't make any sense. But considering all the stuff that's taken in place in town, at least he can humor them by saying, all right, it's a werewolf. How do we kill him? Okay, we need silver. All right, cool. Well, I know a guy who can turn this into a bullet, which is great. I mean, you go to a lot of gunsmiths, and a good number of them, the ones that are worth their weight, can actually make bullets for you because they've got the machinery to do it. I mean, you go into some small towns, especially in the South, you have people who have the stuff in their garages because they like to go shooting, they like to go hunting, and they figure it's a whole lot less expensive for it to make my own stuff than for me to go ahead and buy it all the time. But it was really cool that he's able to humor them by getting this bullet. And my thought, even as a kid, was, one fucking bullet? Better not miss. One fucking bullet? Which, when it first comes up, sounds horrible, but it adds to the tension of this film.
Oh, absolutely.
Because when the uncle, which I still to this day, I'm like, why the fuck would you do that? He burns himself with a cigarette. He gets pissed off about burning himself with a cigarette and staying up till 3:00 in the morning, waiting for this Wolfman to show up. Takes the one bullet out of the gun after he drops the gun. Takes the one bullet out, and I'm thinking to myself, like, as a kid, this would be the perfect time for the werewolf to show up. You've taken the bullet out of the gun. What are you going to do? Because then the werewolf does show up with his one eye, knocks the bullet into different parts of the house. But there's a lot of tension that builds up because you have this child with the inability to walk, who's on the floor, who has to struggle to get to this bullet that has found its way into the air conditioning grate in the floor. He has to struggle to get it, successfully gets it, and shoots and is able to get the gun back. And he and his sister shoot at the werewolf, killing him, and then shooting him in the one uninjured eye, and turning him back into the minister. Which, again, this day and age, as a kid, I'm like, oh man, they killed a werewolf. Turn back. Oh, now they have their proof that the minister was a werewolf. As an adult, I'm like, they got the minister naked in their fucking house. That's what the police are going to see. They're not going to see a werewolf. They're going to see, Reverend Lowe naked, missing two eyes in their fucking house, which is going to open up a whole new batch of questions as to what was going on in that house.
I have many jokes for this, but I'm gonna go ahead and skip them. That's a really great point because even now I hadn't thought about that most obvious fucking thing right there. That's hilarious. Jesus.
Well, no, you know what? Here's something I do have to ask with the werewolf lore and everything like that. Aside from Twilight, the Twilight series, and it's not me picking on the Twilight people. It's just it doesn't seem like it was written or even made for the mainstream or even the dark side of werewolf films or vampire films. But because in those movies, like I guess the guys who were werewolves, the people who were werewolves, like wore pants, but they went around topless, which I think would be interesting because I think even the werewolf that was in Monster Squad, when he changed, he still had clothes covering up his body. I mean, parts of his body. So the pants like would rip and tear, but he still had the pants on. The shirt would rip and tear, but he still had the shirt on for the most part. So my question is, was Reverend Lowe just getting naked and then turning into a werewolf? Or was it something where it's kind of like, you know what? He just happens to lose the clothes in transformation because he can't control it or something.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of like folklore where like it rips your clothes off, or even like it's just that aspect of you're turning wild. So like, I don't remember the story, but I read something in high school where like a werewolf transitioned and still had the clothes. Mm-hmm. And then it was like, not saying this, but it was like, I'm a fucking animal, and it took him off, you know?
Right.
So yeah, I think that a lot of transitions leave clothes because they can't show naked people or thought they couldn't. Just because somebody's naked in your film doesn't mean you have to show anything. Right. But yeah, I think that's kind of where it happened. I also think that some people just don't think things out all the way. So
I would just love
you're gonna end like up that way.
This moment where a werewolf is changing, or a human is changing into a werewolf, and it's like, oh shit, it's time, and he just one by one takes buttons off of his shirt, and then neatly folds up his clothes because he's like, I can't lose this shit again, and puts it off on like the dresser or a chair in his bedroom to come back when he finishes transition and can put his clothes back on, or her clothes back on, because I'm sure that's going to amount to a pretty hefty wardrobe budget,
right?
Or having to explain to people why your clothes are ripped all the time when you go to the laundromat.
I just think it'd be great if when he transitioned back, he walked up to his clothes and there was just a giant pile of werewolf poop on him. That would just be great.
I think we have an idea for a short film now.
That's just the kind of writer I am. That's just the kind of writer I am right there. Werewolf poop. Yeah, so it's not enough werewolf poop in movies. That's all I'm saying.
Oh my gosh. All right. Here's something I still had down as far as, and we really haven't talked about it.
Yeah.
But actually two things. There's that idea of the illusion of unity, because within all these small towns, and even Janie says it at the beginning, or Jane says it at the beginning. I just like calling her Janie. That idea that, this is a town, everybody, basically the idea that everybody in the town knows each other, gets along. They're all, it's a tight knit community and all this other stuff.
Janie's a fucking liar.
Well, yeah. And I don't know if she's a liar. I think it's one of those things of, we see things the way that we want to see them in a lot of cases. And I think that's a problem with a lot of people, approaching, I guess, what can be perceived as reality, or at least a reality different than the one that they've imagined. Because if I go ahead and say, especially now, 2020, people would say things like, America's never been so divided. And I'm sitting here as a historian saying, like, I got some books to show you, bruh. Because, again, it said that 2020, it was said last year, it said the previous
It's kind of like it's like those weather guys that are always like, I don't think it's ever been this hot in Phoenix.
Yeah. 118. Let's look at the record. Oh, last year was 119. My bad. but yeah, that idea of unity where I think Governor Kasich of Ohio a few years ago when he was running for office kind of made that same statement and says, you know, this is America. I remember when we used to take care of each other. What happened? And again, I'm sitting there watching like, what fucking world did you live in? Because the small town perspective is, hey, we all know each other. We all know each other's families. We know each other's families' histories. But that's on the surface. There's that illusion of what's going on there. Because for this town, it seems like they have a pretty sizable population. And they have, I'm sure they have more than that one church, but they have a pretty sizable population to where when Jane goes and walks around there, enough people know her from church or wherever. They know her to where they can, I guess, be somewhat comfortable with her. But then you also get the indication that there are people that have no idea who the fuck she is. She just introduces herself and says, hey, I'm doing, a recycling drive for the church, which would be no different than anybody else coming to your home and asking for donations or soliciting in some other way. But it's really interesting to see how, from her perspective as I'm assuming 17, 18 years old, seeing that because she knows enough people know her, that the people in this town are somewhat united, understand each other. But what's great is that the paranoia, as far as what's taking place, then starts to reveal that you guys don't know each other, because then everyone suspects each other. Everyone suspects what's taking place. Like, oh, so-and-so is kind of a weirdo. It might be that guy. Oh, it might be this person over here. Oh, it could be a drifter. There could be all these things that people are thinking about and questioning where people have been, what they've been doing, what they've been up to, or even, which I thought was a great thing that does not have to just limit itself to what 1976 as far as what this film setting is. People become pissed off with it because they feel he's not doing enough. And what it is the killing has disrupted this peace, unity, this understanding within the community. He's one of those pillars that's supposed to protect it. And now, because he can't protect it, they now don't see him the same way anymore. And because they don't see him the same way, it does start to make them question any of those other pillars or any of those other aspects of their society that they kind of put themselves into or wrapped up into their identity.
It's such a strange thing for anyone who hasn't lived in a small town. Like, you talked about how, like, people know Janie, right? Well, so my mind immediately goes to the fact that one, probably knows it's a small town, but also she'd stick out more because she has a disabled brother.
Right. And that's the other thing.
So then that automatically, sorry, this is a pet peeve of mine and why I don't live in small towns. Everyone knows everything about everybody, or thinks they do.
Right.
And they're always talking about each other, and they're always in each other's shit, and it makes me nuts. And I feel like we get to see a lot of that, but we also get to see that aspect where everybody's nice in these little towns. And what I mean by that is everyone's nice to your face in these little towns. Mm-hmm. And yeah, man, there's so much going on here that, while not fully explored, is really well done, to the point that it makes me uncomfortable to watch it, because I did hate small towns that much. Nothing against people who are good with living there. It just didn't work for me. But I don't know, man. I feel like a lot of times in this film, the people in the town are scarier than the werewolf to me. That especially goes for the bridge scene with the priest. Like, he's way more terrifying to me in his human form. Right. But there's something about that crazy mystique of small towns and how they, like, basically infiltrate each other's lives.
Yeah, I'm with you with respect to the small towns, because when I've seen these movies like this, it makes me feel that same way. I don't ever feel suffocated, or at least I don't recall being suffocated when I'm in a large town, or a large town, a city, or a really large city. because even though there are a lot of people around you, you get to feel alone. You get to feel by yourself. And I think with, one of the problems of this film, and not necessarily the problem of the film, but as far as like what you see in the film is in these small towns, you don't get privacy. You really, I mean, you can have a lot of land. You can have, you can have, a booth to yourself in the diner, but you don't get that privacy. I guess that could come with anonymity of, 2-3 million people in one city or 20 million people in one city. You don't get that anonymity that can come along with that, because if you have, the town diner or the town bar that apparently everybody seems to go to, everybody knows your fucking business. Because you might not be having that discussion with someone. You and I might be sitting at the bar talking about this movie, right? Yeah. Somebody 10 feet away would be interested in saying like, oh shit, I haven't seen that movie in a long time. That would be a great thing to do. And then they would go and say, hey, I saw Don and James at the bar. They were talking about Silver Bullet. And then it turns into, our wives apparently like, oh, what were you guys do? You guys were talking about Silver Bullet at the bar. What was, they're all these. Oh, I saw your husband at the bar the other day. Like, yeah, he and his friend were talking about such and such. It's like, oh, I didn't know your husband drank. That type of shit. As far as it's not just about watching, but it's about surveilling. So there are a lot of times where I've gone places like even around this town in where I currently am. And I'm so glad the fucking masks are part of practice now, because now I can hide from people in public. I can get that anonymity back to where I don't have to worry about, hey, we saw you in Walmart the other day. That was a lot of beer you got. What? Having a party? No.
And you didn't like me? Ha ha ha.
Yeah, that's the type of shit. Because it for me, what I feel when I see that scene is kind of the same thing that those scenes. It's kind of the same thing that you see with Janie, Uncle Red for that matter, because they're talking about, the family's talking about him well before he's even introduced. Like, oh, he's on his third divorce. Oh, he's doing this. Oh, he just can't keep a woman. All these things to kind of shame you about him. And then you realize he's the most normal, free person, because it's kind of like, I don't give a fuck what any of you think. Like, maybe the next one will be a keeper.
And he's so good to Marty.
Yeah. But he doesn't get that. Or maybe he does get that paranoia of being in a small town, but you don't see him really interact with anybody else in the town. It's kind of like, I'm coming to see Marty, coming to see Janie, coming to see my sister, get something to drink, and I'm going to go back to my place. I'm just here to visit because I don't fucking like it here. I mean, and that's the indication I get from him is like, I don't want to be around you motherfuckers. And I think, the paranoia I have about the things that can be seen and interaction that could possibly take place there is probably the same level that the people feel once they have to be, I guess the curfew is mandated. Because now they have to be in their own homes, with their families, with their significant other, before sunset. And now you can really get that interaction between people thinking like, well, who is it? Is the person I'm in this house with maybe the killer? Because you then start to distrust, or you can start to distrust people around you. And once Janie does find out, and by default, I'm sorry, not by default, because it is fully confirmed for him. But when those three, Janie, Marty, and Uncle Red, find out that it is the minister. I mean, you're talking about the 1970s, films in the 80s. Small town minister is supposed to be the most trusted person there is, right?
Yep.
He's the one going around killing people. So what else have I accepted as part of this small town as being reality, and what can I not trust anymore? And that's probably got to be the scariest thing for the people in that town. Not just that the killer is there, but the killer is someone that everyone blindly has trusted.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, it's one of us.
Yeah.
And
I wouldn't trust anybody after that shit.
No, and small towns, again, this isn't me insulting them. Anyone who's lived in one knows this. Like, small towns are very much us versus them. Like,
Right.
at the end of the day, when you break shit down, we're together because we have to be, because we're right here. And whoever's out there, fuck them. And when it's somebody in your ranks, especially in a place where you think you know everyone, that's got to be terrifying. And I think that they do a pretty good job of starting that feeling in this film, but I would really like more follow through with it. I would really like, you get the private justice thing and you get that kind of stuff, but I would really kind of like to see more of the absolute paranoia of who's around and who's not, and like, where was Jim on Friday? Like I don't know. I mean, maybe I want a 6-hour miniseries apparently with everything I'm bringing up, but I feel like more could be done with it, and it could really drive it home.
And it definitely would help. And you talked about not wanting this to be remade. I think this movie would make for a great remake. And I think it would fit. I think it would do well. I mean, there's always the updates that come with CGI and things like that. But I think there would be the opportunity for even more story development or more character development in this. But my fear is with Marty, and I mentioned this earlier, there are only really 2 times that you're dealing with his disability, or at least seeing his disability as a disability. But I think what's great is you see how other people don't treat him any differently for being in a wheelchair. Like and that's so wholesome for a 1985 movie, because I could see it going completely other way where, the parents are sitting there saying like, Marty, you're not like all the other kids. You can't go out there and play ball, and you can't do this. Like, you need to learn how to take care of yourself, because, there are all these patronizing discussions that could be taking place, patronizing conversations that could be taking place, or, perhaps having a full breakdown by Jane talking about how I don't want a quote unquote crippled brother, and, all the type of animosity that could come up, or, it's all these weird things that could be approached in a remake, which would make me hesitant to support one. But I think they could really knock this one out of the park to have Marty, or at least have Marty's character even more developed, that relationship between he and Jane, for that matter, a lot more dead bodies for that.
Oh, yeah.
And not turning the minister's dream, at least not including the minister's dream into this one, and possibly turning it to where, fuck it, it's not one werewolf. Maybe having that flip, like the dream of the minister becomes a reality of where it's people in the town that are doing this, and you don't know how many there are.
Can I just say how much it bothers me that the main werewolf looks so terrible while the werewolves in this scene look decent? I'm like, what were you doing? Like, you couldn't use some of that? Like, what the fuck?
I think they spent all the budget on that one.
Well, I was reading that, and I don't know if this is true. I only read it in one place, but I'm going to share it anyway. I was reading that they took so long sending them the costume for the main werewolf that when they got it, they were already filming. And so even though like the producers fucking hated it, there was nothing they could do. Like, they didn't have time to get another one. And while that's sort of funny to me, I still look at this other scene and I'm like, but you had other werewolves. Like, you could have used something here, It's crazy.
Well, none of that. I did get taken out of the film when you get more of a visual representation of the werewolf. Yeah. Because I kept thinking of the Never Ending Story. It looked like the oh God, I forgot his name. But anyway, the wolf in the Never Ending Story that attacks Atreyu. I kept thinking like, it looks like the same fucking thing. Maybe it was the same studio. I can't recall, but it was one of those things where it looked a little too comical. It didn't look scary. But then again, it doesn't look scary in 2020. 1985, at least the 80s when I saw it, we made jokes about the way it looked, but then we're kind of like, who the fuck has seen a werewolf? So who are we to say what this looks like?
Well, I mean, for me, I come back to American Werewolf in London then, right? Because it came out like, you can slaughter me online for not knowing this off the top of my head, but I want to say it was like 4 years before this. And so when I see an amazing transformation like that, and I see that you're capable of doing this, and then we get this like weird bear man instead. I don't know. There's something about it that just totally pulls me out. And I'm like, you guys could have done better. So I don't feel like it was completely the 80s because other films were doing it. But that doesn't mean they had the budget or they had the right makeup artists or whatever else. Like it's not like now where you can just CGI a cool ass wolf in there if you wanted to.
Yeah, like the Benicio del Toro movie that everyone forgets about.
What movie is that?
The Wolfman? I think it's The Wolfman. Like, I just remember that it existed just as we were having this conversation, because you talk about forgettable Wolfman movies.
What we're trying to say here is everyone go watch Ginger Snaps instead. All right. So before we wrap this up, what other werewolf stories or movies would you suggest to people? All
right. I mentioned it, and it's not just a werewolf film, but I would say it's in that same age period as far as the characters in this film. I'm always going to recommend Monster Squad, because you have a Wolfman that's featured in this. You get to see more of a struggle that Wolfman is going through, because you see how he doesn't want to be a Wolfman, or at least how the human person doesn't want to be a Wolfman, to the point where he's trying to warn people about what's coming. Like, hey, get out of town. I'm going to do this. Or, hey, come get your kid because something bad is going to happen. Where the human side is basically warning people of the animal side. And now in light of Joel Schumacher's passing, I would recommend The Lost Boys. Not a Wolfman film, but still that one of those films that's talking about these towns, how they're impacted by these murders, how family, I guess, starts to pull together to confront whatever the evil is. And then, not Wolfman related, but definitely, since it is summer officially now, I'm going to have to recommend a book for all of you to read this summer, which is, let me look and see if I got this right. Fat Camp by James Sabata. James
sounds terrible.
Here, I'm going to do this because James can cut this or not. I hope he doesn't cut it. James undersells himself when it comes to writing, to screenwriting, anything like that. If you are a fan of 1980s slasher films, which this one fits into as well, if you've seen it, there are definitely those slasher moments. If you have the opportunity, no, fuck that. I'm not going to worry about opportunity. Go buy his book. It's available on Kindle. It's available on Amazon. I'm not going to go over the prices because I'm going to get them wrong if I do state it. James, what are they currently going for?
I don't even know.
Oh, okay. Anyway,
I believe the Kindle version is actually still 99 cents.
99 cents. You got 99 cents. You got a phone. You got a tablet. You don't even need a Kindle anymore. Just go buy his book. Okay. It is a great 1980s throwback to the slasher era. It's one of the books that I honestly finished in one sitting. And I was texting him half the time. I'm like, oh, this was some good shit. This was really cool. Oh, I like this. Oh, man, fuck you. If they turn this into a movie, I have to play this person. He will not puff out his chest for anything he ever does. But what I will say is buy his fucking book before it gets turned into a movie. And I'm not saying if, and I'm not saying when, because if there are, people looking for films out there, with this one being converted into a screenplay and you pass on this one, there's something wrong with you.
Wow, that was the best promo I've ever gotten. Thanks.
You should have seen me when we were at Salt Lake and you were on a panel. I was there by myself. I'm like, James is at a panel right now. He won't say this because he'll be like, hey, it's a book I wrote about this period. It's really cool. And I pop it. I'm like, look, motherfucker.
I would like to see you do that. I would like to see you just jump in with, look, motherfucker, every time you go to sell anybody's book, whether it's yours, mine.
As Joe Exotic, I can be like, guess what, motherfucker? This is available in paperback and on Kindle.
So my answer to the question, obviously I'm a huge American Werewolf in London fan. I can't believe we haven't done it on the show yet. We will. That's just guaranteed at this point to me. Ginger Snaps, absolutely awesome. I don't know, The Howling. There's some really good werewolf stuff, and there's some really bad werewolf stuff. But I will forever. Werewolves are one of my absolute favorite things. I really like the symbolism of the monster within us that we can't control, and I think that is human nature in general. Each of us has a fucking monster. And our lives are about whether we can control that monster or not. And so werewolves hold a very special place in my heart. With that said, if you're going to watch anything else, I would highly suggest Jaws. Because it's summer. Jaws is a fantastic movie. And Jonathan Jans will be here next week to talk about Jaws. So how can you go wrong? There you go. You like how I did that? That little...
Well, I mean, you could go wrong by knowing a fucking shark is out in the water and then refusing to close the beach. And then you could be even worse by being the people in that community and electing that person to come back as mayor.
What if it wasn't a shark? And what if you were just on the beach with COVID-19? Would that be all right?
I don't know. It depends on Florida. Oh, yeah, they've got rising cases. Speaking of COVID-19, this is a PSA. This is an honest PSA that James and I would like to pass on to you before we sign off. If you're out in public, please, please, please make sure to wear your mask. And I mean, like, nose to chin. Wear your mask. Limit your interactions with people. Wash your hands. Avoid touching your face. You know, like if you are an essential worker, and I'm talking about the doctors, nurses, the janitors in hospitals, food service workers, like, thank you for the sanitation workers. Thank you for all you're doing, because in all honesty, if it weren't for any of you, and I'm talking about the guys making the most money to the folks making the least amount of money that are still having to deal with this, thank you. And I hopefully people are not out there giving you as much shit as possible. And in an addendum to this PSA, please don't be one of those people giving any of these customer service, food workers, healthcare workers, janitors, sanitation, any of these people. Don't give them any shit. They didn't make COVID happen. Give shit to the people who could have done something about this as far as preventing it.
And don't deny it. That's all I want to add. Like, it's fucking real. Like, maybe you feel invincible, but some of us don't. So stop it. All right. With that said, whichever ones of you still like us. No, I'm just kidding. Next week, Jonathan Jans really is going to be here to talk about Jaws. I'm definitely looking forward to that. Jans is a great writer. If you need more book recommendations, I definitely suggest checking out his stuff if you haven't already. Until then, I guess I am James Sabata.
And I am Reverend Lord Don Guillory.
And we'll see you next time here on the Necronomicon.com.